Okay, so to start, I would like to welcome everyone to the second Snow Leopard webinar. So as many of you know, my name is Justine. I'm the new ED of the SLN and very pleased to welcome you all again for some updates from the Snow Leopard range. So last time we had the pleasure of Lu Jie sharing the latest updates regarding China's conservation efforts. Today, we have country with potentially the second largest area of snow leopard habitat after China, and that is Mongolia.
Some of you don't know where exactly Mongolia. Mongolia is in Central Asia. It's a landlocked country, and we have a sparse population of citizens, but we will likely have the second biggest population of snow leopard in the world. And most northern part of the snow leopard range are in Mongolia and Russia. It's also home to snow leopard subspecies Panthera uncia irbis. In Mongolia, the snow leopard inhabits in many different types of habitats. For example, in northern Mongolia, it inhabits in very high mountains of northern Altai from 3,000 to 4,000 meters high. And in central Altai, it's continuous high mountains of Altai mountain, and also some isolated mountains nearby the Altai mountain range. In more south, it inhabits the Gobi deserts and small low altitude mountains. More in the south, it inhabits the quite a low altitude from 900 meters to 1,500 meters sea level. Perhaps it's the lowest snow leopard habitat in the world. Also, snow leopard inhabits a very northern part of the Mongolia in Saim mountain range, which is very rugged mountain range. Also in central Mongolia, the Hangai mountain range, which is more like rolling hills with less ruggedness. So snow leopard inhabits many different types of mountains along the Mongolia. So first nationwide population assessment of snow leopard in Mongolia is initiated by WWF Mongolia in 2017, and we secured funding for the project in March 2017 and started the field work from May 2017 by camera trapping survey. And just shortly after that, Bishkek Declaration actually established the pause in August to initiate the snow leopard population assessment in the world. And for the Mongolian population assessment, we are partnering with many organizations, especially Snow Leopard Conservation Foundation in Mongolia, supported by Snow Leopard Trusts, and also many national universities and science institutions. Moreover, many experts and statisticians are helping us to assess this population. For example, Dr. Kostyuk Sharma, Justine Alexander, and Daryl McKenzie, Jan Durbach, and David Borchers. This project is fully funded with the WWF Netherlands and WWF Germans, also some part from Snow Leopard Conservation Foundations. To find out the population size of the snow leopard in Mongolia, we are using several studies. For example, movement surveys and habitat modeling, also occupancy estimates, also camera trapping. This interlinked study surveys will help us to find out how many snow leopards are in Mongolia. For the camera trapping survey, we started it in 2017. We use the spatial recapture method, which is more robust and flexible, also site-dependent method than just the regular capture method. And currently we have almost completed 26 mountains by camera trapping survey to find out how many snow leopards are in each mountains, which covers around 54,000 kilometers square. It's roughly 19% of the snow leopard distribution in Mongolia. And this climate mapping survey was mainly conducted by WWF Mongolia and Snow Leopard Conservation Foundations for the last 3 years. Currently, 16 mountains are finalized and 8 mountains are under the analysis. And this yellow number shows how many adult snow leopards living in these mountains. Also, at the beginning, we also conducted the habitat modeling just to see where snow leopard could be there. And for that, we used the 26,000 locations from 15 individuals along with the partner organizations. And we ran the habitat modeling. But this data is all from the best habitat of snow leopard. So it doesn't really tell all about the snow leopards. It only shows that which area is most similar to this best snow leopard habitat. So we cannot really use this to tell the snow leopards are really living there. It only shows that where the suitable habitat for the snow leopards based on the best habitats. That's why we wanted to assess using more robust methods like occupancy estimates. So first we planned 1,200 grids of each 20 kilometer, which covers roughly 500,000 square kilometer area of Mongolia in western and central Mongolia. And this occupancy estimates fieldwork is conducted during the August to November 2018 for 3 months by 12 teams and 60 researchers and 126 rangers. In total, the 217 people actually participated for this fieldwork. It was quite massive fieldwork. The teams completed 1,017 grids. And in total, almost 20,000 kilometer transects were surveyed by teams. On average, 19 kilometer long tracks are made at each grid. We try to do transects at each grid as even as possible. And at each grid, we conducted 1 to 4 transects. And we surveyed the most likely areas for the snow leopards, usually the mountainous areas in each grid. In total, we found 1,500 snow leopard signs, and we used the 1,421 signs for the occupancy analysis. Scuds are excluded because some scuds were quite controversial, whether it's from snow leopard or not. So for the occupancy analysis, we used 9 site coverage, like elevation, ruggedness, forest, NDVI, and also 8 sampling coverage. We ran 26 models, and the best model showed that the mean ruggedness was available snow leopard habitat, and NDVI and elevation were the most influential coverage. But pretty much all coverages were somehow influencing the snow leopard occupancy at each grid. So this is analysis for the 1,017 grids. Based on this base model, we extrapolated it for the entire Mongolia using the influential coverage. And the results showed that the high probability of being used by snow leopard are 78,000 kilometers square area, and moderately high areas are 135,000 square kilometer, and moderately low areas are 230 kilometers square. And the remaining 73% of Mongolian territory are less likely to be used by snow leopards. And from the result, we found out some difference from the previous snow leopard distribution maps and habitat modeling. For example, in very northern part of Mongolia in Kupsville province, the previous distribution maps and habitat modeling didn't show any sign of the snow leopards much. But there's some, but these occupancy estimates actually revealed that this part of the Mongolia is indeed quite a good habitat for the snow leopards, and in fact there is a snow leopard still living there. And there are several other areas which is quite different from the previous distribution maps. And but we also cannot say that all these blue grids are actually have snow leopards. Of course, snow leopards have a territory in the mountainous region, so that's why we drafted the snow leopard. Wait a minute. Snow leopard distribution map based on these occupancy results. And to draft this, we used the territorial science during the occupancy survey and also other science during the last 3 years from other surveys. And we used the natural barriers and topography for drawing the borders, such as the mountain slope, big rivers, and valleys. But this distribution map needs some review and more refinements by stakeholders. And from this preliminary distribution map, it revealed that in Mongolia, 286,000 kilometers square area are the snow leopard distribution, the snow leopard range, of which 150,000 square kilometers are the confirmed territory by the snow leopard science. But the potential territory doesn't mean there is less snow leopard. It just simply means that we didn't find the actual proof that snow leopard lives in these areas. So, do we have sufficient data to calculate the population size of the snow leopard in Mongolia? Unfortunately, we don't have sufficient data because all the camera trapping we conducted during the last 3 years ended up to be surveyed in a high and moderately high probability of the snow leopard occupancy. If we use this data to calculate the snow leopard population size in Mongolia, we will likely end up with the positive bias of 23%, which means we will overestimate the snow leopard population. So to avoid such a bias, we need the more extra surveys by camera trapping at the low and medium density probability of snow leopard areas. That's why we are now conducting the camera trapping surveys at the 3 extra mountains. The survey started from May and it will end in September and October. Once we completed this extra camera trapping surveys, we will cover roughly 26% of the all snow leopard range in Mongolia, which is 76,000 square kilometer area, and it will be hopefully enough to assess the population size of the snow leopard without any serious biases. And these surveys, camera trapping surveys are conducted by WWF Mongolia and Snow Leopard Conservation Foundation, and also 6 state protected areas. These orange and yellow areas are right now being surveyed by camera trappers. So once it's completed, we now have enough human manpower and experts to identify the snow leopards and analyze the population size in short time because of previous 3 years experience. So we are likely going to finish the answer the answer that how many snow leopards are in Mongolia by end of this year, and hopefully disseminate the final report by early 2021. So thanks for the attention.
Thank you, Gantuga. Thank you so much. And you're right on time in terms of time. So thank you for the very visual and interesting presentation. So as for people, if everyone can feel free to write questions in the chats. As you do so, I would like to go first to Puji. And maybe Puji, I mean, you were part of this effort, I mean, covering, like Gantuga says, not only in terms of sign surveys, but also camera trap surveys, which camera traps cover over 76,000 kilometers squared, which is huge. The sign surveys covered over 400,000 kilometers squared, which is also massive. Can you share more about how this is more the collaborative effort and how this happened, Puji?
Yeah. Hello, everyone. I was leading of that nationwide occupancy survey. Hello?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. Yeah, nationwide snow leopard distribution of Mongolia. I was leading in the South Gobi sites parts, and that during that survey in I just collaborated with 4 national parks rangers, 4 specialists, and then also collaborated with some local people as a community volunteer rangers, and then also national park rangers. It is a total about in my area, it's about 70 to 80 people involved for that server. First, we Gantler suggested to leading of that Gobi area. I was conducted with taking some permits from the National Ministry of National and Environment, and then also we just talked about how we could do that server and use that the best method of the snow leopards distribution in all over Mongolia. And before the server started in the Gobi area, we Snow Leopard Conservation Foundation and Snow Leopard Trust, we just tested in some small area how we could do that in snow leopard sign. We trained for the rangers for national park specialists on that area, and the server wasn't easy. It's also spent a lot of people timeline, and then also is a budget in it's extra. And I think it's that the better is we need to after the training for the rangers for national park or communities, Snow Leopard Conservation Foundation engaging rangers in communities, we need to build their capacity for the future. Yeah, that's I think the project helped the bring this benefits to them, I think.
Thanks, Puji. So yeah, you're talking about in the South Gobi over 80 to 90 rangers or other communities involved. Gantuga, how much was it in all the other areas? So there must have been a lot of different people involved with the different organizations. Do you have an estimate to add to Puji's comment about capacity building and across the country?
For the capacity building, we also trained some around 60 rangers in the field, 60 to 70 rangers in the field, how to identify the snow leopard signs and how to record the signs. Also for the camera tracking survey, we are also involving our over 100 rangers and locals and researchers. And we also conducted several trainings on the occupancy estimates, camera trapping analysis in Mongolia. And for these trainings, almost 40 researchers actually learned. And for the occupancy fieldwork, there's just for the occupancy fieldwork, it's over 200 people participated. For camera trapping, it's some almost around 200 also is participated.
And yeah, that's huge. And how come Puji and Gantuga, you know, I mean, there's so many people involved in such a survey and so systematically also, you know, from governments to local communities to rangers to different NGOs, you know, Snow Leopard Conservation Foundation, WWF, there were other NGOs involved. How were you guys able to do that? How were you able to come together? Like, what is special about Mongolia or about this effort that you were able to do that?
For that, of course, without this joint work, collaboration, it's pretty much impossible to conduct by one organization. The government actually supporting it quite well, and they were actually gave us the green light to utilize all rangers and protected area administrations. And also there's a quite well established NGO like Snow Leopard Conservation Foundation, which has ample experience, then the WWF Mongolia also helped very much for us. Because I was quite new in this field, just 3 years, and I had no idea how to survey it. And Snow Leopard Trust and the Snow Leopard Conservation Foundation actually helped us how to conduct it systematically and help us to design these surveys and also conducted it together.
Puji, anything else to add to Gantuga's comments about the collaboration?
And I think it's without our trust, collaborating with the WWF or the organization, the survey can't be successfully done. So, but in, you know, it's Snow Leopard trust, and we have a really long time, you know, it's a data collection and the data analyzing experience, and then so is that we share it for our knowledge for the other organization in Mongolia. We trained for lots of, you know, it's including an Academy of Science and then WWF and then university people. We trained them how we collecting the camera trap data, how we set up the cameras on the mountain, and how we analyze the you know, snow leopard science. We trained them. That's why it's our collaboration is giving us a really good, successfully done for that in a nationwide survey, I think.
Nice. And so besides, you guys both are talking about training, capacity building. So that's obviously this other benefit. I mean, obviously we'll hopefully get the number of snow leopards, the more robust distribution, but we'll also get capacity of rangers, people on the ground, so that they can do continual surveys and monitoring over the long term. But what were other benefits in terms of like conservation action that you might think throughout the country, Gantuga and Puji, if maybe you have some thoughts? And then I see some questions coming in on the chat. So if you can just share this, and then I'll come to other people's questions that seem to be arriving.
You know that currently pretty much no one knows exactly how many snow leopards are living exactly in which mountain and where, and what is the population situation there. And by completing this survey, we will have this data that where are they are and which are the corridor areas that we should protect to keep some isolated populations alive, and also we can actually plan much better effective conservation actions based on these results. Which mountain have more trees and site-based trees, and we can actually implement the conservation actions to reduce such specific threats at the particular mountains. And also, this Mongolian population is somehow the source population of the Russian population. So the transboundary snow leopard population is also important. That's why WWF Mongolia is working with WWF Russia and protected areas to monitor and protect this link between Mongolia and the Russian populations.
Nice. Thank you, Gantuga. That's a great explanation. Puji, do you have any other thoughts about the conservation action? Like Gantuga said, the need to not only know populations where they are in the mountains and threats, but also the corridors. Because not everyone here knows Mongolia's snow leopard habitat, Puji. So can you explain a little bit more about, you know, what's the situation there and dispersal? Because it's not continuous mountains, right? Can you share a little bit to explain how that influences conservation?
Yeah, especially in I think in the Gobi area is a more dispersed of the snow leopard population. In the Snow Leopard Conservation Foundation, we are working in since 2008 for implementing a new long-term project in South Gobi sites. And during that work, until now, is that we are working with the national park people, and then setting up the cameras, how the snow leopard is dispersing in each mountain, and we are trying to create it. Also, is for working with the rangers, since we they know very well on that area. So is that we based on that there's knowledge, is that we are working together, and then trying to, you know, is that the main threat of the snow leopards, for example, is trying to stop in poaching, and then also working with the local community people.
Thank you, Puji. So I see a question from the audience, which is directed towards you, Gantuga, from Sibyl, and she's asking if there's any early estimate on the snow leopard number, what it could be.
Some estimates. The Dr. Mukhchok actually estimated that Mongolian snow leopard is the population size around 700 to 1,000. And this estimate is made a decade ago. And before that, there's also some estimates, but the more previous ones mostly based on the experts' opinion rather than the real facts, actually.
And what about your estimate? I think she's also wondering about your estimate, or is it too soon? Is it too soon to say anything in case it changes?
Yes, it's too soon to say, because we needed more data to calculate it. For right now, if we calculate the population size, then it will likely overestimate quite a lot. So we need more data to estimate it. This final population size will likely be completed at the end of this year.
I think, yeah, I would like to add a little bit in Antl's thoughts. And I think it's we have enough camera data of most of the continuous mountain of the western and southern sides of Mongolia. Now is that we need to know that how many snow leopards maybe in the low density areas. That's why is that we are trying to find out that most of the some testing mountains. I think it's it will be, yeah, Gantlach said, is that we will be estimate the Mongolian population number in of this next year, I guess. Yeah.
Thank you both. And then I have another question related to fragmentation. So is there much fragmentation by human activity across the snow leopard range, especially in Mongolia? So are there some isolated populations that potentially cannot disperse? For example, if there are young dispersing from their mothers, are there boundaries that stop it from dispersing to other mountains areas? So I think what's interesting for most people to understand is in Mongolia, right, it's these mountain especially in the Gobi, in the Altai, it's more continuous, but it's these mountain islands that are surrounded by desert steppe, right? And then the snow leopards do move between these isolated mountains. So is there areas that it's very fragmented and it stops dispersing snow leopards between mountains?
Currently, you know that before there's not enough information. So now we are doing the researches, and that's why we cannot really tell exactly this area, specific area is being fragmented or separated, isolated from the main populations. But there's lots of snow leopard records in the long, big valleys, especially in this area, these areas, and also these areas. So there's still movement between Hangai mountain population and Altai mountain populations. So we cannot really tell. It's really fragmented, and whether these snow leopards are managed to reach there and come back there. But it's likely they are moving from one to another.
How far are these mountains? Just to give people a sense of scale, how far are these?
This area is some 60, 70 kilometer Gobi this year. And for this area, they also migrate on the lakes during the winter. So it's some hour, 100 to 200 kilometer. And between these Gobi mountains, it's also some 200 kilometer, quite a long distance for such animal.
Great, thank you. And we have another question related to the method, which I know, Puji, you also have a lot of experience with the method, the spatial capture, recapture, and we also have some people in the audience. We have who helped Ian, right? He's also here. But feel free to also reach out to them if you guys want. But someone's asking that spatial capture, recapture often have a problem of low recapture rates. Which then makes, for example, precision of the estimates quite hard. And that has been, for example, in the Himalayas. So the question is, how have you addressed or hope to address to have more robust estimates in density estimates from the camera traps itself?
In Mongolian cases, actually we are deploying quite a lot cameras for at least 3 months. And from each mountain, we receive some 50 to 100 recordings, and the variance is not so much, some 10 to 20%. So in Mongolian case, I think it's not so big problem. Maybe in the high mountains in the Himalaya, it's quite hard to find the right place and deploy a lot of cameras. In Mongolian case, we are deploying hundreds of them, so it's quite well data.
Thank you. And also maybe Kustub Sharma, right, who has worked with these models. Do you have anything to add to that?
Hi, yes, hi Justine, and hey Gantulga, amazing presentation, and Puji, wonderful support. So I just wanted to add one little comment to, I think we have a very good question by Naresh Kusi. So Naresh, what's really fascinating is if you have a team which is able to set up the cameras like how Gantulga and Puji's team have done. In fact, in Kyrgyzstan also, we've just completed sampling a relatively low density area. What's really spectacular is that you just end up with fewer. And in our case, the fewer number of encounters was 50, right? And yes, it increases your variance, but you still get data, you still get information. And the beauty of spatial capture recapture is that you can borrow information from neighboring areas, from other regions, and use it to improve your estimates. I'll not get into too many of these details, but there is definitely a lot of scope in making use of these parameters, which can be borrowed from other regions, and that's one of the strengths of spatial capture recapture. I mean, I'm not someone who should be saying here, given Ian Dubuck, who's helping us with this whole analysis, and the procedures is here. But you might want to also, just before I end, you might want to also check there are these excellent guidances on where to set up your cameras, given some predictions of where your densities, how your densities could be. And those kind of guidances at times can help improve the precision of your data, even if you have relatively low encounter rates.
Thanks, Gustav. And just Gantulia and Fuji, if you guys don't mind, just because we do have, and Gustav mentioned Ian, and you guys mentioned how you worked with Ian. He's a postdoc at St. Andrews University who works on these models. So I thought we could ask Ian, share some thoughts on the methods used today. So not only SCR, but also the occupancy models that Gantuga presented. Do you have any thoughts to share? But no, I know you're a very a statistician that understands these models really, really to the finest details. But if you can share in simple layman and laywoman terms for us, it would be great. Just some thoughts from Gantuga's presentation.
Sure. Hi, everyone. Yeah. Thanks, Gantuga and Puji, for a really nice presentation. I think I can't add too much to it because I think they explained the main issues really well. But maybe just to add to what Costa was saying about Naresh's question, just to start, I think that snow leopards are very challenging species to study, and one of the reasons is that they're in difficult to survey areas where encounter rates are typically low. And I think what Kostub said just about doing everything you can during the setup phase to try and get your encounter rates as high as possible. So choosing good sites, leaving the cameras out for as long as you can, those sorts of things. That's kind of the best that you can do in some situations. The one thing I'd add to that is that before you go and do your surveying, you can, there are a number of programs and pieces of software that allow you to sort of experiment and see what happens if I get this many recaptures, what happens if I get this many captures. And that will give you an idea about whether you're pushing your survey into areas where SCR kind of struggles with. You do need a certain number of captures and recaptures for the methods to work, and a rough rule of thumb is kind of 10 to 15 of each. So you can obviously it's difficult to know up front, but there's some nice user-friendly software that will allow you to get to grips with some of those questions. And I think the kind of Pause Initiative, or I would be happy to kind of answer questions offline. If people are welcome to get in touch if they want more information about that. So the other thing that I think is really kind of important with the Mongolian case study is that it's a huge, I'm kind of in awe of the effort that's gone into it. It's a huge survey, and I think there's what we have at this, or what Gantuga and Puji have shown, is that within the areas that have been surveyed, we've got a really excellent idea of how many snow leopards are in those individual survey regions. So in particular parks and areas, we know with pretty good accuracy how many snow leopards there are. But the challenge is in extrapolating from those areas to the whole country. And I think Gantuga put it really nicely. Then if you've sampled in the most favorable areas, and you try and extrapolate from the areas where you've surveyed to the areas that you haven't surveyed, it's difficult or impossible to do. And I think that maybe it's worth just spending sort of a minute elaborating on that. The idea with extrapolating is that if you've surveyed half of the country and you found 1,000 snow leopards, then if you surveyed half the country, you just double the number and you'd have 2,000 snow leopards in the whole country. But that depends on the half of the country that you've surveyed being representative of the half that you haven't surveyed. And I think typically in snow leopard surveys, because of the difficulty of the survey work, that's understandable. The tendency is to go to the areas where the snow leopards are most likely to be found. But if you try and extrapolate from that, then it's always a question of, is the area that you've surveyed representative of the bigger area? And that's something that's subjective. So you might think yes, you know, the area that we've been to is pretty representative, then someone else might come along and say, well, I don't think it's representative at all. And I think those are exactly the type of kind of disagreements or arguments that we try and avoid with a statistical sampling design. So we need to go to high density areas, we need to go to low density areas, and if we do that in a kind of a systematic, agreed upon way up front, then you take care of these potential disagreements about is your area representative or not. So even in Mongolia, where, you know, they've surveyed a huge, I mean, I think on one of the slides I said it's up around 20% of snow leopard habitat has been covered by camera traps, which is phenomenal. You know, even even there, you have these issues about is how to go from the 20% that you have sampled to the 80% that you haven't sampled. So I think there's, you know, traditionally spatial capture methods have been designed and applied in areas where what you really want to know is how many snow leopards are in a kind of a relatively small area, a survey region. And what the Mongolian study is doing is really pushing to the sort of the current state of the art to take that information and to try and extrapolate countrywide. So it's kind of a slightly unmapped territory. We'll to a certain extent working things out as we go, but it's yeah, it's really exciting. It's a really exciting sort of time and case study to work on.
Thank you, Ian. Can I ask you and Kustub to actually write in the chat, in case people are interested on knowing more about these surveys, to write where they can access some of this information, or even your emails, Kustub, maybe the GSLAB website as well. That would be really helpful. And then I just want to go back to a few other questions, and then maybe we'll come back to you, Ian. Is that good? Thank you so much. These are so helpful to make us understand also, like you said, how this is cutting edge approach, right, that they're putting together. And just to make sure everyone, other questions were asked, Dantuga, I want to go back to you, and I want you to ask, there's someone who's asking, was there any surprises in terms of the snow leopard distribution that you found out that, you know, was not as expected?
Yes, there's some areas, especially in North Mongolia, people tend to think it's impossible for the snow leopards, and they consider it's not the habitat for snow leopard. But our survey found out that it's in fact a quite good habitat for the snow leopards, and actually the area of this northern habitat is quite big, and that was quite a big surprise for us. And also people assume that these small rolling hills are all this snow leopard habitats, but in fact it's not really. It's more like a mosaic and separated from each other.
So especially it was in the north, right, bordering with Russia. So this is a question, yeah. It builds on, and someone else has asking about fences. For example, maybe fences related to livestock herding or fences due to frontiers. Is this an issue in Mongolia in terms of for snow leopards or for prey as a potential threat?
Unfortunately, in Mongolia, quite a lot of snow leopards are being killed because of it's a retaliatory killing, or it's a bycatch for sometimes. And we are testing some fencing in Mongolia to reduce the livestock loss, thus local herders will tolerate some predation in the pasture land. The results showed quite promising. The fences are really protecting from the wintering camps, corals, but in pasture, the most livestock is being treated by the pasture land, or 60%. So it cannot really be the single solution. So we are actually promoting this fencing, but in some areas.
And Puji, is it similar threats in the South Gobi? So Gantuga is highlighting about retaliatory killing. Can you share more?
Retaliatory killing is the main threats in Mongolia. So we are, as a Snow Leopard Trust, we are implementing in a fencing project in South Gobi province in one of the home. It's a quite, the results of the fencing, the protected livestock, it's after that 2 years, our result, it's a really good, it's quite good results give us. The corral, we are fencing out of the livestock corral for about the 10 herders family. It's after 1 year, nobody's lost that there is livestock from the corral. But we can't calculate in account of how many livestock is losing from the pasture yet. Yeah.
And are there other threats, other big threats? So you're talking about retaliatory killing. What are other big threats?
Yeah, retaliatory in the South Gobi area, we have lots of, in the south side of the snow leopard habitat, they have many mining companies there. Mining is maybe some issues in the South Gobi area, but I think it's not all over the Mongolia. And then also that, you know, it's a loss of prey. No, I mean, it's a habitat, you know, it's the wild prey of the ungulate, I mean, in ibex in Argali habitat, is people are living in near to the mountain. That's the big issues of the snow leopard habitat loss.
Thank you, Puji. Anything else to add, Gantuga, to that? I see another question related to poaching and retaliatory killing. If this could influence your survey results, the way you collect your data, in terms of finding, you know, evidence of whether there's snow leopard there or not.
I don't think it influenced significantly. We surveyed pretty much all mountain, all areas, even the quite hard to reach areas that people really don't go there. And also from the last years of data, the poaching is not so big. Some 30 to 40, 15 dutas per year is being poached. So I don't think it influences the result quite a lot.
And then going back to the modeling, just to come back, there's questions about why in the first place you're combining the camera trap and the occupancy data. It's explaining a little bit more, because a lot of people here might not be so familiar with occupancy modeling and also camera trapping. So Gantuga, I don't know if you want to try to answer, and we can also go back to Kustubor Ian, also if they have some thoughts of why we're trying to combine these two methods.
Camera trapping can actually assess the population size quite well in small areas, scale area. But the occupancy, it actually can detect exactly where the snow leopard and how likely the snow leopard is in this area. So by using this, combining these two methods, we can actually have a quite a good good reliable number of snow leopards, because of the modeling, modeling cannot really provide such things, and other methods actually cannot really provide. So this is the best we have so far. And if Kostub, could you provide some thoughts? You could explain much clearer. Yeah.
Not at all, Gantulga. You actually answered it very well, really. I mean, there's not much I can possibly add here. But just to really reiterate, occupancy data was collected using science surveys across the country to find where snow leopards are, right? We thought we knew where snow leopards are, but I think what Gantulga has presented today has also revealed that we probably didn't really know very well where all snow leopards are. So I think that was a very important step to find out where they are, and also be able to create a surface which gives us some idea about where there is a greater chance of a snow leopard to be there, where there is a lesser chance of a snow leopard to be there, because these in a way define 2 or 3 or 4 types of habitats or categories of snow leopard distribution with very high to probably low distributions. So we are not really planning to combine the 2 data sets at all. We are just going to use one data set to improve our inference from the other data set. So they're really 2 separately used methods. They're just being brought together to inform each other much better, and not more than that. Ian, unless I've missed something, please feel free to add if you would like to add anything to this. But really, I mean, ultimately, occupancy does not tell us how many snow leopards. It just tells us where snow leopards are. But camera trapping is what tells us how many snow leopards in a smaller amount of area. And that's the purpose why we are using occupancy to know where they are. And then in a certain design, we are trying to estimate how many there are using camera trapping data.
Thanks, Kusub. That's really well explained, and Gantuga too. But I wonder, let's ask Ian though. He might even whip us away even more with another explanation. Ian, anything else to add?
No, I don't have anything to add. I think those are both covered everything.
But then, so how does occupancy compare, for example, to other potential methods that have been used in the past? Gantulga has explained that they did have other habitat modeling, other potential presence points of where snow leopards were. Can you explain just, quickly, very simply? I think it's our last 2 minutes, so maybe this will be the last 2 things before we go back to Gantulga and Puji for a last word. Any thoughts about how this method is different from previous methods?
Sure. Well, I think with occupancy models, you can build in the detection process. So, I mean, with a difficult to find species like snow leopards, it may be there, but you won't see it if you go there, just because the conditions weren't right or whatever. Occupancy modeling gives you a way to explicitly model that. Other approaches, they can do it, but it's not as natural and kind of easier fit as occupancy models. Occupancy models, you have an explicit model for that detection process, and so I think it's generally accepted as the way to go, ideally.
For species, especially like elusive snow leopards.
Yeah.
Thank you. No, that's very helpful. So back, we're running out of time. Thank you so much to everyone for these great, and I'm sorry if I missed any questions in the chat. We'll definitely, please send them to us. We'll keep these discussions going, but I want to go back to Gantulga and Puji for one last thought. If they have anything else to add before we end today, anything else to share with our Snow Leopard Network members or more, please go ahead. Any last thoughts?
Thanks for your attentions, and if you guys need some more information or would like to know more about this assessments, then please contact us and we will be happy to answer your questions.
Thank you, Gantulga. And Puji, if you're still with us, I know it's getting late in Mongolia.
Oh, I'm here. Okay, so yeah. Yeah, I think it's yeah, I don't need to additional thing. Maybe, yeah, if you guys need any questions, email us. Yeah.
Thank you, guys. So thank you, everyone. And I mean, one thing that I'm particularly struck, not only that you guys are using cutting edge kind of methods, but also the spirit of collaboration that Puji, you mentioned, that seems to have run from like the beginning to end, not only rangers, NGOs, GSLEP across countries, but also, the government of Mongolia. And I hope that you guys not only write this up in an academic paper, but also write the story behind how it happened, because I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of great anecdotes that can help guide other surveys throughout the world for snow leopards or for other species. So I hope, yeah, I hope we see that book, Puji or Gantuga, about behind the story survey. But before we leave, I just want to send a small flyer for our next webinar, which actually we plan this to build on this webinar. And we have a professor who's going to come and join us called David Bochers. And if many of you know, he's very articulate. He explains very complex theory and analysis really well in simple terms. And he'll be joining us with actually Kustub Charma, which you got to meet here today shortly. And they'll be talking about more the global view of snow leopard conservation across its range. So I hope you can join us for this. It will be, and the discussions behind it will be on later in July. But then after, we also have webinars lined up for other countries, for Nepal, for India, and Bhutan. So please, you know, stay tuned for the other webinars and feel free to get in touch if there's anything we can do for members or anything. But yeah, thank you so much for everyone for showing up and sticking around. And thank you for Gantruga and Puji for your time.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you all. It was a great meeting.
Thank you. We'll record it. So it'll be there. And thank you to Raki for all the coordinating and behind the scenes. Raki, you're a superstar for the Snow Leopard Network. You're our rock.
Thanks, Justine. Thanks, Gantuga. Thanks, Puji. It was great. Thank you, everyone, for attending.